The storm hit like the end of the world. Mara Keaton had seen dust storms before. Every drifter on the Texas frontier had. But this one was different. This one had teeth. The sky turned copper, then black, and the wind came screaming across the flats with a sound like 1,000 voices all shrieking the same warning, "Run!" She didn't run fast enough. The first gust knocked her sideways off the dirt road, sent her stumbling into the scrub brush with her satchel flying from her grip. She tried to shield her face with her arm, but the dust found every gap, every opening. It filled her mouth, her nose, her lungs. She couldn't see, couldn't breathe. The world became a suffocating wall of grit and darkness. Her knees hit the ground, then her palms. She thought about her mother's voice, distant now, like something heard underwater. "You're too heavy to be out there alone, girl. World's hard enough without carrying all that weight." The weight. Always the weight. Her fingers clawed at the dirt, but there was nothing to hold on to. The wind kept pushing, kept burying her. She felt herself tipping forward, felt the panic rise in her chest like a trapped animal. And then a hand grabbed her collar. It yanked her backward with enough force to crack her spine, dragged her across the ground like a sack of grain. She couldn't fight it, couldn't even tell which direction was up. All she knew was that someone, something, had her, and the roar of the storm was starting to fade into a muffled, distant thunder. When the pressure finally lifted, when air that wasn't dust hit her face, Mara sucked in a breath so hard it made her ribs ache. "You breathe through your mouth in a storm like that. You'll choke on your own tongue." The voice was rough, flat, and completely unimpressed. Mara blinked through the haze, tears streaming from her burning eyes. She was on her back, staring up at a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same rock as the land around him. Tall, rangy, with a face weathered past 40 and eyes that didn't blink. His hat was tied down with a leather cord, and his coat was caked in dust so thick it might as well have been part of his skin. "You got a death wish, or just stupid?" he asked. Mara coughed, rolled onto her side, spat a mouthful of dirt into the sand. "Neither." "Then why the hell are you out here alone?" "I wasn't planning on the storm." "Nobody plans on the storm. That's why you don't walk alone." He turned away, scanning the horizon like she wasn't even worth the conversation. Mara pushed herself up onto her elbows, her whole body aching, and took stock of the situation. They were tucked behind a rocky outcrop, sheltered from the worst of the wind. The storm was still raging out there. She could hear it, feel it, but here, in this pocket of stillness, she could at least think. The man crouched down, checked the knot on his horse's reins. The animal was skittish, but holding. Smart horse. Smarter than her, apparently. "You always pull strangers out of storms?" Mara asked, her voice hoarse. "Only when they're dumb enough to need it. Appreciate the kindness." Wasn't kindness. Was common sense. He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable. "You got a name?" "Mara. Mara Keaton." "Cole Mercer." He didn't offer a hand, didn't smile. Just went back to checking his gear like saving her life was something he did twice a week and didn't think much about. Mara sat up fully, brushed the worst of the dust from her coat. Her satchel was gone, probably halfway to Oklahoma by now. Everything she owned had been in that bag. Not much, but it was hers. "You heading somewhere specific?" Cole asked, still not looking at her. "Nowhere specific, anywhere that'll have me." "That narrows it down." "I'm a cook," Mara said, and hated how defensive it sounded. "Or I was. Been drifting since the drought hit. Figured I'd find work somewhere." "Cook," Cole snorted, finally turning to face her. "You got references?" "I got a pulse and 2 hands that work. That's more than most." "Not out here, it isn't." The storm began to ease, the roar fading to a low, angry growl. Cole stood, untied his horse, and swung up into the saddle with the kind of ease that came from a lifetime of doing it. "You're just gonna leave me here?" Mara asked. "Storm's dying. Road's a mile east. You'll make it." "I don't have my bag, don't have water." Cole reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a canteen and tossed it down. It landed in the dirt at her feet. "That'll get you to the next town. Don't drink it all at once." He clicked his tongue and the horse started moving. "Wait, don't follow me," Cole said, without turning around. "I ain't running a charity." And then he was gone, swallowed by the fading dust. Mara sat there for a long time, staring at the canteen. Her lungs still burned. Her throat was raw. Every inch of her body ached like she'd been trampled by a herd of cattle. But she was alive, and that meant she owed him. Mara Keaton didn't believe in a lot of things, God, luck, second chances, but she believed in debts. You didn't walk away from a debt, not if you wanted to live with yourself. She picked up the canteen, took a long drink, and stood. Somewhere out there, Cole Mercer had a life, a home, a place he went back to at the end of the day. And sooner or later, Mara was going to find it. 3 weeks later, she did. Iron Ridge wasn't hard to find. People talked about it the way they talked about a wound that wouldn't heal. A ranch that used to be something, back before the foreman died and the owner's wife went with him. Now it was just a name on a map and a warning to anyone thinking about working cattle in hard country. Mara stood at the edge of the property line, staring at the sprawl of rotting wood and sun-bleached paint. The main house was 2 stories, sagging in the middle like a broken spine. The barn looked like it might collapse if you breathed on it wrong. Fences were down in 3 places she could see, and the livestock, what little there was, looked half-starved. 16 men worked this place, according to the bartender in town. 16 men and 1 owner who didn't talk much and didn't smile at all. Mara adjusted the brim of her hat and started walking. She made it halfway to the house before someone stepped out to meet her. Not Cole. The man who blocked her path was shorter, stockier, with a face like a clenched fist and eyes that looked at her the way you'd look at a coyote circling the henhouse. He had a rifle slung over one shoulder, casual but deliberate. "Help you?" he asked, though his tone made it clear he wasn't interested in helping anyone. "I'm here to see Cole Mercer." "Mr. Mercer's busy. I'll wait." The man's jaw tightened. "You got business here?" "I do." "What kind?" "The kind I'll discuss with him." A flicker of something, annoyance, maybe anger, crossed his face. He stepped closer, close enough that Mara could smell the tobacco on his breath. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you are or what you think you're doing, but this ain't the place for you. Turn around, walk back to town. Forget you saw this place." "No." "No?" He laughed, sharp and humorless. "You got stones, I'll give you that. But stones don't mean much when you're trespassing." "I'm not trespassing. I'm settling a debt." "Debt." He looked her up and down, slow and deliberate, and Mara felt her stomach twist. She'd seen that look before, knew what it meant. "What kind of debt does a woman like you think she's got with Mr. Mercer?" "The kind that's none of your business." The man's hand moved toward the rifle. "Briggs." The voice cut through the tension like a blade. Cole stood on the porch of the main house, one hand on the railing, his expression flat and unreadable. He looked older than Mara remembered, or maybe it was just the light, harder, more tired. "Let her through," Cole said. Briggs, the man with the rifle, didn't move immediately. He stared at Mara for another long moment, then stepped aside with a grunt. "Your funeral," he muttered, and walked away. Mara crossed the yard, climbed the steps, and stopped in front of Cole. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged just slightly. He looked like a man who'd been carrying something heavy for too long. "You're a long way from where I left you," Cole said. "You left me with a canteen and a mile walk. Most people would call that generous. Most people don't know what a debt is." Cole's eyes narrowed. "I don't want your gratitude." "Good, I'm not offering it. Then what do you want?" Mara glanced past him, toward the open door of the house. Inside, she could see the dim outline of a hallway, dust motes floating in the slanted light. The air smelled like old wood and something else, something stale and forgotten. "I want to cook," Mara said. Cole blinked. "What?" "You saved my life. I owe you. I'm a cook." "Let me cook." "I've got men who handle the food." "Do you?" It wasn't a question. It was a challenge. Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment Mara thought he might actually throw her off the property himself. But then something shifted in his expression, something tired and resigned. "You don't know what you're asking," he said quietly. "Then tell me." "The kitchen's been closed for 2 years. So open it. It's not that simple." "Why not?" Cole didn't answer. He just stared at her, and in that silence, Mara saw it, the weight he was carrying, the thing that had hollowed him out and left him standing here, on the edge of his own land, looking like a man who'd already lost the fight. "Give me 3 hours," Mara said. 3 hours. 3 hours in that kitchen. If I can't make something worth eating, I'll walk away. You'll never see me again. And if you can, then we talk about how I settle my debt. Cole studied her for a long time. Behind him, Mara could hear voices. Men moving, working, the low murmur of a ranch trying to survive another day. She could feel eyes on her, watching, waiting to see what the boss would do with the stranger who'd walked in like she had a right to be there. Finally, Cole stepped aside. 3 hours, he said. After that, I want you gone. Mara walked past him, into the house, and didn't look back. The kitchen was worse than she'd imagined. It wasn't just closed, it was sealed. The door had been shut so long the hinges had started to rust. The windows were covered with thick curtains that blocked out every scrap of light. When Mara pushed the door open, the smell hit her first. Stale air, old grease, and something faintly sweet and rotten, like fruit left to decay in a dark corner. She stepped inside, let her eyes adjust to the gloom. The space was large, larger than she'd expected. A long wooden table dominated the center, its surface scarred and stained. Pots and pans hung from hooks on the walls, covered in a thick layer of dust. The stove was a massive iron beast, cold and silent. Shelves lined the walls, stocked with jars and cans that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. And everywhere, there was dust. Mara set her bag down on the table, rolled up her sleeves, and got to work. First, the windows. She tore down the curtains, let the light flood in. It didn't make the place look better. If anything, it made it worse. But at least she could see what she was dealing with. Next, the stove. She spent 20 minutes clearing out the ash and debris, checking the flue, making sure the damn thing would actually light. When she finally got a fire going, the heat filled the room like a living thing, and Mara felt something loosen in her chest. This was familiar. This she could do. She found flour in one of the jars. Old, but still good. Salt, lard, a sack of potatoes in the corner, half of them sprouted but salvageable. Onions. A few strips of dried meat hanging from a hook in the back. Not much, but enough. Mara worked fast, her hands moving on instinct. She peeled the potatoes, chopped the onions, rendered the lard in a heavy skillet until the kitchen filled with the smell of hot fat and caramelizing vegetables. She cut the meat into chunks, browned it hard, then added the potatoes and a splash of water from the pump. While that simmered, she mixed the flour and lard, rolled out dough, and cut rough biscuits that she slapped onto a baking sheet. By the time the 3 hours were up, she had a pot of stew thick enough to stand a spoon in and a tray of biscuits still steaming from the oven. She set the food on the table, wiped her hands on her apron, and stepped outside. The yard had filled with men. Not all 16, she counted maybe 10 or 12, but enough. They stood in a loose half circle, watching her the way you'd watch a rattlesnake, wary, suspicious, ready to move if she did something unexpected. Cole was at the front, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Briggs stood next to him, smirking. "Well?" Briggs called out. "You gonna feed us, or just stand there looking proud of yourself?" Mara didn't answer. She just stepped aside and gestured toward the open door. "It's ready." Nobody moved. "Come on," Briggs said, louder now. "Let's see what the lady cooked up. Maybe it's worth the wait. Maybe it's pig slop." A few of the men laughed, nervous, uncertain. Cole didn't laugh. He walked forward, slow and deliberate, and stepped into the kitchen. The others followed. Mara stayed outside, listening to the sound of boots on wood, the scrape of chairs, the low murmur of voices. She didn't know what they were saying. Didn't need to. She just waited. The first man out was young, maybe 20, with a thin face and hands that shook slightly when he wasn't using them. He looked at Mara, opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then closed it and walked away. The second man was older, gray-haired, with a limp that suggested an old injury. He nodded once, just a dip of his chin, and kept walking. Then another, and another. By the time Cole stepped out, the yard was empty except for the two of them. He stood on the porch, staring at her, and Mara couldn't read his face. "That was the first meal anyone's eaten in that kitchen in 2 years," Cole said quietly. "I know." "How?" "Because you wouldn't have let me in otherwise." Cole's jaw worked, like he was chewing on something he didn't want to say. Finally, he exhaled, long and slow. You cook like that every day? If you let me. Why? Because I owe you. I told you, I don't want your gratitude. Good, Mara said again. Because what I'm offering isn't gratitude, it's work. You need someone in that kitchen. I need a place to be. That's the deal. Cole looked past her, toward the barn, the fences, the land stretching out in every direction. He looked like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, trying to decide whether to jump or step back. You stay, he said finally. You follow the rules. You don't ask questions. You don't get involved in ranch business. You cook, you clean, you stay out of the way. Deal. And if Briggs gives you trouble, I'll handle Briggs. Cole's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. You really think you can? I've handled worse. He studied her for another long moment, then nodded. You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Don't be late. He turned and walked away, and Mara stood there on the porch, watching him go. She'd done it. She'd found a place. It wasn't much. It wasn't safe. But it was hers, and she wasn't letting go. That night, Mara slept in a small room off the side of the kitchen, barely more than a closet, with a cot and a single blanket. But it was warm, and it was quiet. And for the first time in 3 weeks, she didn't dream about the storm. She dreamed about the kitchen, about the men who'd walked through it, silent and stunned, like they'd forgotten what real food tasted like. About Cole, standing on the porch, looking at her like she was a problem he didn't know how to solve. About Briggs, with his smirk and his rifle, and his eyes that promised trouble. Mara woke before dawn, splashed cold water on her face, and got to work. The ranch was already stirring by the time she stepped outside. Men moved through the yard like shadows, heading toward the barn, the corrals, the fences. Nobody looked at her. Nobody spoke. She didn't expect them to. She went back to the kitchen, fired up the stove, and started breakfast. By the time the sun crested the horizon, the smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee had drifted across the yard, and one by one, the men began to filter in. They didn't talk, didn't thank her, just filled their plates, ate standing up or leaning against the walls, and left. But they came, and that was enough. For now. A week passed, then 2. Mara fell into a rhythm, up before dawn, cook breakfast, clean the kitchen, prep for lunch, cook lunch, clean again, prep for dinner, cook dinner, clean one more time, collapse into bed. Every day, the same. The men started to relax around her, not much, but enough that she could tell. They stopped watching her like she might poison them, started saying thanks when they took their plates. A few even lingered after meals, sitting at the long table, talking in low voices about the work, the cattle, the fences that needed mending. Mara didn't join the conversations, but she listened. She learned their names, learned who was reliable and who wasn't, learned that Briggs ran the day-to-day operations with an iron fist and a short temper, learned that Cole barely spoke to anyone, spent most of his time out on the range, and came back every night looking more worn down than the day before. She learned that the ranch was dying. It wasn't obvious at first, not if you didn't know what to look for, but Mara had worked enough failed kitchens to recognize the signs. The way the men moved with a kind of resigned exhaustion. The way supplies ran low and nobody seemed surprised. The way Cole stood on the porch every evening, staring out at the land like he was watching it slip through his fingers. Iron Ridge was bleeding out, and nobody was talking about it. Mara kept cooking. She started small, adding vegetables to the stew, baking bread instead of buying it, stretching the meat so it lasted longer. She scavenged the pantry, found jars of preserves that were still good, canned tomatoes, dried beans. She made soups that could feed 20 men with half the ingredients. The men noticed. "This is good," one of them said one night, a grizzled hand named Otis who'd been with the ranch longer than anyone. "Real good." "Thanks," Mara said. "You learned to cook like this somewhere?" "My mother." "She teach you anything else?" Mara smiled, thin and sharp. "How to survive." Otis grunted, went back to his food. But the next day, he brought her a rabbit he'd shot, left it on the kitchen counter without a word. It was a start. 3 weeks in, Briggs finally made his move. Mara was in the kitchen prepping for dinner when he walked in. He didn't knock, didn't announce himself, just strolled in like he owned the place, which, in a way, he did. "Smells good," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "It'll be ready in an hour." "I ain't here for the food." Mara kept chopping onions, didn't look up. "Then what are you here for?" "To talk." "About what?" "About you." Now she looked up. Briggs was smiling, not the mean, mocking smile from before, but something colder, something calculating. "You've been here almost a month," he said. "Longer than I expected. That a problem?" "Depends." "On what?" "On what you think you're doing." Mara set down the knife, wiped her hands on her apron. "I'm cooking, that's it." "No," Briggs said, pushing off the doorframe. "You're stirring things up, getting the men comfortable, making them think things can be different, can't they?" "No." He stepped closer, and Mara held her ground. "This ranch is dying," Briggs said, his voice low. "Has been for 2 years, and nothing you cook is going to change that." "Maybe not, but it'll keep them fed while they figure out how to fix it." Briggs laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Fix it? You think Cole's going to fix this place? He can't even fix himself." "That's not my business." "Then what is?" "Cooking, staying out of the way, settling my debt." "Your debt?" Briggs shook his head. "You really believe that? That you owe him something?" "I do." "Then you're dumber than you look." Mara's jaw tightened, but she didn't rise to it. She just picked up the knife and went back to chopping. Briggs watched her for a long moment, then turned and walked out. But Mara knew this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, Mara found a dead rat on the kitchen counter. It was positioned carefully, deliberately, right next to the cutting board where she'd left her knife the night before. The message was clear enough. Someone wanted her rattled. Someone wanted her gone. She picked up the rat by its tail, walked outside, and threw it into the brush without saying a word. Then she went back inside and made breakfast. The men filed in like always, filling their plates, eating in silence. Nobody mentioned the rat. Nobody looked at her any differently. But Mara could feel it, the tension in the air, thick as smoke. They knew. They all knew. And they were waiting to see what she'd do about it. She did nothing. She cooked, she cleaned, she kept her head down and her mouth shut. By noon, a second rat appeared, this time in the flour sack. Mara threw it out, sifted the flour, and kept working. By evening, Briggs was standing in the doorway again, watching her knead dough with that same cold smile on his face. "You're tougher than you look," he said. Mara didn't answer. "Most women would have run by now." "I'm not most women." "No," Briggs agreed. "You're not." He stepped inside, picked up one of the biscuits she'd baked that morning, took a bite, chewed slowly, considering. "You know what your problem is?" he asked. "I'm sure you'll tell me. You think you matter here. You think because you can cook a decent meal, that makes you valuable. That makes you safe." Mara stopped kneading, looked up at him. "And you think because you've been here longer, that makes you untouchable." Briggs's smile faded. "Careful," he said quietly. "Or what?" "Or you'll find out what happens to people who don't know their place." He set the biscuit down, turned, and walked out. Mara watched him go, her hands still buried in the dough. Her heart was pounding, but her face stayed calm. She'd dealt with men like Briggs before, men who used fear like a weapon because it was the only thing they had. She wasn't afraid of Briggs, but she was starting to understand the shape of the problem. This wasn't just about her. This was about control, about power, about a ranch that was barely holding together and a foreman who'd built his authority on keeping everyone too scared or too tired to question him. Mara was a threat, not because she was dangerous, but because she was different, because she didn't flinch, because the men had started looking at her with something other than suspicion. And Briggs couldn't have that. The rat stopped after the second one, but the tension didn't. Over the next week, small things started going wrong. Supplies went missing, the stove wouldn't light properly. A bag of potatoes she'd been saving for stew disappeared overnight. Nothing catastrophic, nothing she could prove. Just enough to make her work harder, to make her doubt herself. She didn't complain, didn't ask for help. She just adapted. When the potatoes vanished, she made soup with beans and the last of the dried meat. When the stove acted up, she fixed it herself, scrubbing out the flue until her hands were black with soot. When flour went missing, she stretched what she had, rationed it, made it last. The men noticed. They didn't say much. Most of them still kept their distance, but Mara caught the glances, the way Otis lingered after meals, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. The way a younger hand named Danny started bringing her firewood without being asked. The way even the quiet ones, the ones who never spoke, stopped avoiding her eyes. It was small, fragile, but it was something. And then Cole came to the kitchen. It was late, well past dinner. Mara was scrubbing down the counters, getting ready to close up for the night, when she heard the door creak open behind her. She didn't turn around. "We're closed." "I know," Cole's voice. Mara set down the rag, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned to face him. He looked worse than usual, if that was even possible. His shirt was filthy, streaked with mud and something darker. Blood, maybe. His face was drawn, his eyes shadowed. He looked like a man who'd been riding hard for days and hadn't slept in longer. "You need food?" Mara asked. "No." "Then what do you need?" Cole hesitated, his jaw working. He glanced around the kitchen, at the clean counters, the organized shelves, the stove still warm from the day's cooking. When he looked back at her, there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, not relief, guilt. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. Mara crossed her arms. "Little late for that." "I mean it. This place, it's not safe." "Safe from what?" "From falling apart. From taking everyone with it when it does." He moved to the window, stared out at the dark yard. "I should have turned you away that first day. Should have told you to keep walking." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was tired. Because I thought—" He stopped, shook his head. "Doesn't matter what I thought." "You thought I couldn't do it," Mara said. "You thought I'd last a day, maybe two, and then I'd leave on my own." Cole didn't deny it. "But I didn't leave," Mara continued. "And now you don't know what to do with me." "No," Cole said, turning to face her. "Now I'm trying to figure out how to keep you alive." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and serious. "Briggs," Mara said. It wasn't a question. "He doesn't like change, doesn't like threats." "I'm not a threat." "You are to him." Cole's voice was flat, exhausted. "You're making the men think, making them remember what this place used to be, and that scares him." "Why?" "Because if they start thinking, they start asking questions. And if they start asking questions, they start realizing how bad things really are." Mara studied him, really looked at him for the first time since he'd walked in. The slump in his shoulders, the way he held himself like every bone in his body ached. This wasn't just about Briggs, this was about something deeper, something broken. "What happened here?" she asked quietly. Cole's jaw tightened. "That's not your concern. You just told me I'm in danger. I think that makes it my concern." For a long moment, Cole didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at nothing, and Mara thought he might actually walk out without another word. But then he spoke. "My wife died in this kitchen." The words came out flat, emotionless, like he'd said them so many times they'd lost all meaning. Mara went very still. "She was cooking," Cole continued, his voice distant. "Middle of the day. No one else around. Stove caught fire, spread faster than anyone expected. By the time we got to her—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "She didn't make it out." Mara felt something twist in her chest. Not pity, exactly. Something sharper. Something that hurt to hold. "That's why the kitchen was closed," she said. "That's why." "And Briggs?" "Was foreman before it happened. Stayed foreman after. Kept things running when I couldn't." "And now?" Cole looked at her, and for the first time Mara saw the full weight of what he was carrying. It wasn't just grief. It was debt. Obligation. The kind of loyalty that tied a man to someone, even when that someone was slowly destroying everything around him. "Now I don't know who's running this place anymore," Cole said. "Me or him." He turned and walked to the door, paused with his hand on the frame. "Watch yourself, Mara. Briggs won't come at you directly, but he'll find a way." Then he was gone. Mara stood alone in the kitchen, listening to the silence, and thought about everything he'd just told her. A dead wife, a closed kitchen, a foreman who ruled through fear, and a man too broken to stop it. She thought about leaving, about packing her things and walking out the same way she'd walked in, owing nothing, risking nothing. But she didn't, because this wasn't about the debt anymore. This was about something else entirely. The next day, Mara broke the first rule. She got involved. It started small. One of the hands, a kid named Rafe, maybe 19, with a crooked nose and a nervous laugh, came to breakfast limping. When Mara asked what happened, he shrugged it off, said he'd twisted his ankle in the corral. But Mara saw the bruise on his ribs when he reached for a plate. She didn't say anything, not then, but later, when the kitchen was empty, she cornered Otis. "What happened to Rafe?" she asked. Otis glanced around, made sure no one was listening. Same thing that happens to anyone who talks back. "Briggs?" Otis didn't answer, but he didn't need to. "Someone needs to stop him," Mara said. "And who's going to do that? You?" Otis shook his head. "Lady, I like you. You cook better than anyone we've had in years. But you don't know what you're talking about. Briggs runs this place, has for 2 years. Cole don't have the spine to stand up to him anymore, and the rest of us," he gestured vaguely, "we're just trying to survive." "Survive what?" "Whatever's coming." "And what's that?" Otis looked at her for a long moment, then sighed. "Ranch is broke," he said quietly. "Has been for months. We're barely making enough to cover feed, let alone wages. Another bad season, and we're done. All of us." "Does Cole know?" "Cole knows. He just doesn't want to admit it." Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And Briggs?" "Briggs knows, and he's got his own plans." "What kind of plans?" Otis didn't answer, just gave her a look that said she was asking the wrong questions. That night, Mara started paying attention. She watched the way Briggs moved through the ranch, confident, assured, like he owned every inch of it. Watched the way the men deferred to him, not out of respect, but out of habit, fear. She watched Cole, too. The way he avoided the bunkhouse, avoided the men. The way he spent more time out on the range than he did running his own operation. And she started to see the shape of it. Briggs wasn't just the foreman, he was the spine, the thing holding this place together. And he knew it, which meant Cole was expendable. And if Cole was expendable, so was everyone else. Mara thought about what Otis had said, about plans, about survival, and she started to wonder what exactly Briggs was planning for when Iron Ridge finally collapsed. 2 days later, she found out. She was in the pantry, taking inventory, when she heard voices outside. Low, deliberate. She moved to the window, peered through the gap in the curtain. Briggs stood in the yard, talking to 2 men Mara didn't recognize. They were dressed like ranch hands, but something about them was off. Too clean, too sharp. One of them had a ledger tucked under his arm. Mara couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw the way Briggs smiled, the way he shook their hands, the way he glanced toward the house, toward Cole's office, with an expression that made Mara's skin crawl. When the men left, Briggs stood there for a moment, staring after them. Then he turned and looked directly at the kitchen window, directly at Mara. He smiled and walked away. Mara stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she'd just seen, didn't know what it meant, but she knew it wasn't good. That night she went to Cole. She found him in the barn checking on a horse that had gone lame. He didn't look up when she walked in. "What do you want, Mara?" "I need to talk to you. I'm busy." "It's about Briggs." That got his attention. Cole straightened, wiped his hands on his pants, and turned to face her. "What about him?" "He had visitors today. 2 men. They didn't look like ranch hands." Cole's expression didn't change. "So?" "So I think they were buyers. Buyers. For the ranch." Cole went very still. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said quietly. "Don't I?" Mara stepped closer. "This place is dying. You said so yourself, and Briggs is making plans. Plans that don't include you. Briggs wouldn't what? Wouldn't sell you out? Wouldn't take what's yours?" Mara's voice sharpened. "Wake up, Cole. He's already doing it." Cole stared at her, his jaw tight, his eyes hard. For a moment, Mara thought he might actually throw her out of the barn. But then something shifted in his face. Something that looked almost like fear. "Even if you're right," he said slowly, There's nothing I can do about it. I don't have the money to keep this place running. Don't have the credit. Don't have... He stopped, shook his head. I don't have anything. You have this land. You have the men. You have... I have nothing, Cole said, his voice rising. You understand that? Nothing. My wife is dead. My ranch is dying. And the only man who's kept this place from collapsing completely is Briggs. So yeah, maybe he's making plans. Maybe he's selling me out. But at least he's doing something. He turned away, went back to the horse. Get out of here, Mara. Go back to the kitchen. Stay out of this. Mara stood there for a long moment, watching him, and felt something harden in her chest. She'd come here to settle a debt, to repay a life saved. But this wasn't about debt anymore. This was about survival. And if Cole wasn't going to fight for this place, then someone else would have to. She left the barn, walked back to the kitchen, and started planning. The first thing she did was talk to the men. Not all of them. She wasn't stupid. But the ones she trusted. Otis, Danny, a hand named Caleb who'd been with the ranch since before Cole's wife died. A few others who looked at her with something other than suspicion. She didn't tell them about the buyers. Didn't tell them about Briggs. She just asked questions. How much meat do we have left? Not enough for winter. What about hunting? Briggs won't let us. Says it wastes time. And the cattle? How many are we losing each season? Too many. Fences are down, predators getting in. We can't keep up. What if we fix the fences? What if we set up a proper rotation? What if nothing? Otis interrupted. Briggs won't go for it. He's got his way of doing things, and it don't involve changing anything. Then we don't ask Briggs, Mara said. Otis stared at her. You serious? Dead serious. Lady, you got no idea what you're starting. Maybe not, but I know what happens if we don't start something. This place collapses. You all lose your jobs. Cole loses everything, and Briggs walks away with whatever he's negotiated for himself. The men exchanged glances. Nobody spoke. Finally, Danny cleared his throat. What do you need? Mara smiled, thin, sharp, and absolutely certain. I need you to trust me. They didn't trust her, not completely, but they were desperate enough to listen. Over the next 2 weeks, Mara put her plan into motion. She started with the kitchen, rationed supplies more carefully, stretched every meal as far as it would go, made soups that could feed 20 men with half the ingredients, baked bread that lasted 3 days instead of 1. Then she moved to the men. Convinced Otis to take a small crew out hunting. Early morning, before Briggs woke up. They brought back 2 deer and a handful of rabbits. Mara preserved the meat, smoked it, stored it for winter. She talked Danny into repairing the fence line on the north pasture, the one Briggs had ignored for months. It took them 3 days, working after hours, but they got it done. She convinced Caleb to set up a rotation for the cattle, moving them between pastures so the land had time to recover. Small changes, incremental improvements, but they added up. The men started working harder, started talking more, started looking at each other with something other than exhaustion. And Briggs noticed. He didn't say anything at first, just watched, waited. But Mara could feel him circling, getting closer, waiting for the right moment to strike. It came 3 weeks after she'd started. She was in the kitchen making dinner when Briggs walked in with 4 men behind him. Not ranch hands. The same 2 men she'd seen in the yard, plus 2 more. They looked like hired muscle, big, mean, and ready for trouble. Briggs leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smiling that cold, calculating smile. We need to talk, he said. Mara set down her knife. About what? About what you've been doing. I've been cooking. You've been stirring up trouble. I've been making improvements. Without permission. I didn't know I needed permission to do my job. Briggs' smile widened. Your job is to cook. That's it. You don't make decisions. You don't organize the men. You don't change how this ranch operates. Someone has to. Not you. The 4 men shifted behind him, moving closer. Mara held her ground. You planning to do something about it? I'm planning to remind you of your place. He stepped forward, and Mara felt her pulse spike. She wasn't afraid. Not exactly. But she wasn't stupid either. She was alone, outnumbered, and Briggs knew it. Get out of my kitchen, Mara said, her voice steady. Your kitchen. Briggs laughed. This ain't your kitchen, lady. This ain't your ranch. You're here because Cole felt sorry for you, but that's over now. Cole isn't here. And even if he was, he wouldn't do a damn thing to stop me. Mara's jaw tightened. You think you run this place? I know I do. Then you're even dumber than you look. The smile vanished from Briggs' face. He moved fast, faster than Mara expected, grabbed her by the arm, yanked her forward, slammed her against the counter hard enough to knock the wind out of her. You want to know what happens to people who don't know their place? He hissed in her ear. They disappear, and no one asks questions. Mara's hand found the knife she'd set down moments earlier. She didn't think, just moved. The blade pressed against Briggs' ribs. Not hard enough to cut, but hard enough to make a point. Let go of me, she said quietly. Briggs froze. Behind him, the four men tensed, hands moving toward their belts. You won't do it, Briggs said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Try me. For a long, tense moment, nobody moved. Then Briggs released her arm, stepped back slowly, hands raised. You just made a big mistake, he said. No, Mara said, lowering the knife. You did. Briggs stared at her, his face twisted with rage, then turned and walked out. The four men followed. Mara stood alone in the kitchen, shaking, the knife still clutched in her hand. She'd crossed a line, and there was no going back now. Word spread fast. By morning, everyone on the ranch knew what had happened. Mara saw it in the way the men looked at her, some with respect, some with fear, most with a mixture of both. She'd pulled a knife on Briggs' Hale. Nobody did that. Nobody lived to talk about it. But she had. And now she had to live with the consequences. Cole found her before breakfast, pulling her aside into the empty dining hall with a grip that was just shy of painful. What the hell were you thinking? His voice was low, controlled, but anger burned underneath every word. I was thinking he was about to break my arm. So you pull a knife on him? What was I supposed to do, ask nicely? Cole released her, stepped back, ran a hand through his hair. He looked like he hadn't slept. Probably hadn't. You don't understand what you've done, he said. I defended myself. You declared war. Mara crossed her arms. War was already here. I just stopped pretending it wasn't. Briggs won't let this go. He can't, not after you made him look weak in front of his men. Good. Maybe someone else will finally grow a spine and stand up to him. Cole's eyes flashed. You think this is about pride? About who's tougher? This is about survival, Mara. This ranch is hanging by a thread, and the only reason it hasn't fallen apart completely is because Briggs kept it together when I couldn't. By terrorizing everyone? By beating men who question him? By making deals behind your back to sell this place out from under you? Cole went very still. What? Those men who came here. The ones with the ledger. They weren't checking cattle prices, Cole. They were appraising your land. You don't know that. I know enough. Mara stepped closer, held his gaze. He's planning something, and when it happens, you won't have a ranch anymore. You'll have nothing. Cole stared at her, his jaw working, something broken and desperate in his eyes. For a moment, Mara thought he might actually listen, might actually fight. But then he shook his head. Stay out of it, he said quietly. Just stay out of it. He walked away, and Mara stood there feeling like she'd just lost something she'd never really had in the first place. The men came to breakfast, but the atmosphere had changed. They ate quickly, didn't linger, didn't talk, kept glancing at the door like they expected Briggs to walk in with a shotgun. He didn't. That was somehow worse. Otis waited until everyone else had left before approaching Mara. You need to leave, he said bluntly. Today, before this gets worse. I'm not leaving. Then you're a fool. Probably. Mara started clearing plates. But I'm a fool who's staying. Why? What's here that's worth dying for? Mara paused, looked at him. Nothing. But if I leave now, if I run because Briggs scared me, then I might as well have never come at all. I owe Cole. Cole can't protect you. Can't even protect himself. I know. Then why stay? Mara didn't have a good answer for that. Not one she could put into words. So she just shrugged and went back to work. Otis watched her for a long moment, then sighed. You're going to get yourself killed, he muttered, and walked out. 2 days passed. Briggs didn't come to the kitchen, didn't speak to her, didn't even look at her when their paths crossed in the yard. But Mara could feel him planning, could sense it in the way the ranch moved, slower, more careful, like everyone was waiting for something to break. On the third day, it did. Mara was outside hanging laundry when she heard the shouting. She dropped the sheet, ran toward the sound, and found a crowd gathered near the barn. In the center, Danny was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose, while Briggs stood over him with a length of rope in his hand. "Get up," Briggs said. Danny tried. His legs buckled. "I said get up." "He can't," Caleb said, stepping forward. "You've already—" Briggs turned, swung the rope, caught Caleb across the face. The older man went down hard. "Anyone else want to speak?" Briggs asked the crowd. Nobody moved. Mara pushed through the men, stepped into the circle. "That's enough," she said. Briggs smiled. "Well, look who decided to join us. The hero herself." "Let him go." "Why would I do that? Boy stole from me, took supplies without permission. That's theft." "He took supplies to fix the north fence, the one you've been ignoring for months. Doesn't matter why. What matters is he did it without asking. Because you would have said no." "Damn right I would have." Briggs stepped closer to Mara, the rope still in his hand. "See, that's the problem with you, lady. You think you can just change things. Think you can organize the men, redistribute resources, make decisions like you own this place. But you don't. You're just the cook. And you're just the foreman." Briggs's expression darkened. "I'm the man keeping this ranch alive." "No, you're the man bleeding it dry." The words hung in the air, sharp and dangerous. Briggs moved fast, raising the rope, and Cole's voice cut through the tension like a gunshot. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Cole stood at the edge of the crowd, his hat pulled low, his face hard. He looked tired, but he also looked angry, really angry, for the first time since Mara had arrived. "Let the boy go," Cole said. Briggs didn't move. "He broke the rules." "I don't care." "You should, because if we don't enforce—" "I said, let him go." Something shifted in Briggs' face. Surprise, maybe, or calculation. He held Cole's gaze for a long moment, then dropped the rope. "Your ranch," he said quietly. "Your rules." He walked past Cole without another word, and the men parted to let him through. Mara knelt beside Danny, helped him sit up. His nose was definitely broken, and one eye was already swelling shut. "Can you walk?" she asked. "Yeah, I think so." She pulled him to his feet, let him lean on her. Caleb was already up, holding his jaw, looking shaken but standing. Cole watched them, his expression unreadable. "Get them to the bunkhouse," he said to Otis. "Clean them up." Then he turned to Mara. "You, with me." He didn't wait for an answer, just started walking toward the house. Mara followed, her heart still pounding, her hands shaking from adrenaline she hadn't let show. Cole led her to his office, a small, cluttered room that smelled like old paper and whiskey. He shut the door, turned to face her. "You were right," he said. Mara blinked. "About what?" "About Briggs. About the buyers. About all of it." Cole moved to his desk, pulled out a stack of papers. "I went through the books last night. Really went through them. Found discrepancies. Money missing. Supplies unaccounted for. Small amounts but consistent. Going back months. He's been stealing. Not just stealing. Planning. Building up his own reserves while the ranch starves." Cole's jaw tightened. "And those men you saw? They're investors, looking to buy distressed properties for cheap. Briggs has been feeding them information, making sure this place looks as bad as possible so they can swoop in when we finally collapse." Mara felt something cold settle in her stomach. "And then what? He gets a cut?" "Probably. Or maybe they bring him on to manage the place after they take it. Either way, he wins." "So what are you going to do?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers like they might hold an answer he couldn't find. "I don't know," he admitted. "Even if I fire him, he knows too much. Knows every weakness, every debt. And the men, half of them are loyal to him, not me. If I make a move, he could take them with him, leave us with nothing. Then you need to give the men a reason to stay." "How?" "By showing them this place is worth fighting for." Cole looked at her, something desperate and raw in his eyes. "And how do I do that?" Mara thought about the kitchen, about the meals she'd made, the changes she'd implemented, The way the men had started to look different, less defeated, more alive. "You start by making them partners," she said, "not just workers." "What does that mean?" "It means you stop treating them like they're disposable. You give them a stake in this place. You show them that if the ranch survives, they survive with it." "I can't pay them more. I barely have enough to cover what I owe now." "Then you give them something better than money. You give them hope." Cole shook his head. "Hope doesn't fix fences. Doesn't pay debts." "No, but it keeps men working when there's no other reason to. And right now, that's what you need." He studied her for a long time, and Mara could see him turning it over, weighing it, trying to decide if it was brilliant or insane. "You really think that'll work?" he asked finally. "I think it's better than doing nothing." Cole exhaled, long and slow. "If this goes wrong, then we're no worse off than we already are." That got a bitter smile out of him. "Fair point." He moved to the window, stared out at the ranch, at the broken fences, the struggling cattle, the men moving through the yard like ghosts. "All right," he said quietly, "tell me what you need." What Mara needed was time and trust and a whole lot of luck. Over the next week, she and Cole worked in secret, planning, organizing, figuring out how to pull off something that had probably never been tried in the history of ranching. They kept it quiet, told no one, because if Briggs found out what they were planning, he'd burn the whole operation down before they could even start. Mara kept cooking, kept maintaining the routines. But now she was watching everything, tracking supplies, monitoring the men, noting who was loyal to Cole and who answered to Briggs. It wasn't a clean split. Some men were hard to read. Others were obviously playing both sides, hedging their bets. Danny and Caleb were solid. Otis too, though he grumbled about it. A few others, younger hands, men who'd only been on the ranch a year or two, seemed willing to follow whoever gave them the best chance at survival. Briggs had maybe 7 men who were completely loyal to him. Maybe more. It was going to be close. On the 8th day, Cole called a meeting. Not in the house, not in the barn, out in the yard where everyone could see, where there was no hiding. The men gathered slowly, suspicious, tired. Briggs stood off to one side, arms crossed, watching with that same cold calculation. Cole climbed onto the porch, looked out at the assembled crowd. "I know things have been hard," he started, and his voice was rough but steady. "I know this ranch isn't what it used to be. I know you've all been working for scraps and promises that don't mean much anymore." Nobody spoke. They just waited. "But I also know you're still here," Cole continued. "You could have left months ago, could have found easier work, better pay. But you stayed, and I need to know why." Silence. Then Otis cleared his throat. "Because there's nowhere else to go." A few men nodded. Others looked away. "That's part of it," Cole agreed. "But it's not all of it. You stayed because this place matters, because you've put blood into this land, because even when everything's falling apart, you can't quite let go." He paused, looked at each of them. "I'm not going to lie to you. We're broke. The bank's breathing down my neck. We've got maybe 3 months before they come to collect. And if we don't have the money by then, they'll take everything. The land, the cattle, the buildings, all of it." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some men shifted, looked at each other. "But I've got a plan," Cole said. "It's risky, it's probably stupid, but it's the only shot we've got." "What kind of plan?" someone called out. "A cattle drive. We take what we have, push them north to the rail station. Sell them at market price instead of taking what the local buyers are offering. It's further, harder, more dangerous, but the profit's better. A lot better." "How much better?" Briggs asked, his voice carrying over the crowd. Cole glanced at him. "Enough to make the payment, maybe with some left over. And if something goes wrong, if we lose cattle, if the drive fails, then we lose everything." Briggs smiled. "So it's a gamble. It's a chance. A chance to throw away what little we have left." Cole's jaw tightened. "You got a better idea?" "Yeah, we cut our losses. Sell what we can while there's still buyers. Take what money we get and walk away before the bank takes it all." "That's giving up. That's being smart." The men were watching now, really watching, not just listening, but weighing, deciding which man to believe. "I'm not giving up," Cole said, his voice harder now. "And I'm not asking you to, but I'm asking you to take a risk with me. And if you do, If you help me pull this off, then I'm making you partners. That got everyone's attention. Partners, Otis repeated. You work the drive, you get a cut of the profit. Not just wages, a real percentage. You put in the effort, you share in the reward. Briggs laughed, sharp, derisive. You hear that, boys? He's going to make you partners. With what? His debt? His failing ranch? You really think he's got anything left to share? I've got this land, Cole shot back, and I've got men willing to fight for it. That's more than you've got. Briggs' smile vanished. Careful, Cole. No, I'm done being careful. I'm done letting you run this place into the ground while you make deals behind my back. The crowd went dead silent. Briggs took a step forward. What are you accusing me of? I'm not accusing, I'm telling. You've been skimming supplies, cooking the books, talking to buyers about selling this ranch out from under me. That's a lie. Is it? Cole pulled out the papers from his office, held them up. Because I've got proof, records, transactions, all of it pointing back to you. Briggs's face went hard. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. You've been planning this for months, bleeding us dry so you could swoop in when we collapsed and take what's left. You've lost your mind, have I? Cole looked at the men. Ask him about the investors, the ones who came here 3 weeks ago, the ones with the ledger. Briggs didn't answer. You can't, can you? Cole pressed. Because you know it's true. You've been selling us out piece by piece, and you thought I was too broken to notice. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Briggs spoke, his voice low and dangerous. You want to do this? Fine, let's do it. He turned to the men. You all heard him. He wants to risk everything on some half-baked cattle drive. Wants to gamble your lives, your wages, everything you've got left on a plan that'll probably fail. And why? Because he's desperate. Because he can't accept that this place is done. It's not done, Cole said. Yes, it is. It's been done since your wife died and you crawled into a bottle instead of running this place. I'm the one who kept it alive. I'm the one who made the hard decisions while you hid. And now you want to throw me out because you finally decided to grow a spine? Cole's fists clenched. Get off my land! Make me! The two men stared at each other, and Mara felt the tension ratchet up another notch. This was it, the moment everything either came together or fell completely apart. Then Otis stepped forward. I'm with Cole, he said. Danny moved next to him. Me too. Caleb joined them. Then another man. Then another. One by one, the men made their choice. When it was done, Cole had 11. Briggs had 5. Briggs looked at his group, then at Cole, and something ugly twisted in his face. You just signed your own death warrant, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked away, his men following. The ranch felt different after that, quieter, tenser, like everyone was waiting for the other shoe to drop. Briggs and his men moved into the far bunkhouse, stopped coming to meals, stopped interacting with the rest of the crew. They worked, but only the bare minimum. And they watched, always watching. Mara kept cooking, but now she was also planning, working with Cole to organize the cattle drive, figure out routes, calculate supplies. They had 3 weeks to prepare. 3 weeks to get everything ready before the drive had to start if they wanted to reach the rail station in time to make the bank payment. It wasn't enough time, but it was what they had. Cole threw himself into the work with a focus Mara hadn't seen before. He was up before dawn, working until after dark, driving himself and the men hard. Too hard, maybe. But nobody complained. They just worked, because they all knew what was at stake. The night before the drive was set to begin, Cole found Mara in the kitchen. You should stay here, he said. No. Mara, I'm going. It's too dangerous. So is staying here with Briggs. Cole opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. Because she was right. With most of the men gone on the drive, the ranch would be vulnerable. And Briggs wasn't the type to let an opportunity like that slip by. I'll leave Otis and 2 others, Cole said finally, to keep an eye on things. That's not enough. It's all I can spare. Mara nodded slowly. She didn't like it, but she understood. How long will you be gone? She asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3 if we hit trouble. And if something goes wrong here, then you run. You get out, and you don't look back. Mara didn't answer that. They both knew she wouldn't run. Couldn't. Cole studied her for a long moment, then sighed. You're stubborn as hell, you know that? So I've been told. He almost smiled. Almost. Take care of this place, he said. Whatever happens out there, I need to know someone's watching the home front. I will. He nodded, started to leave, then paused. Mara? Yeah? Thank you. For everything. Then he was gone, and Mara was alone in the kitchen, listening to the silence and wondering if she'd made the right choice. The drive left at dawn. Mara stood in the yard, watching the men move out. Cole at the front, Danny and Caleb and the others behind him, driving the cattle north toward whatever waited for them. It should have felt hopeful, like a new beginning. Instead, it just felt like goodbye. The dust from the cattle drive hadn't even settled before Briggs made his first move. Mara was in the pantry, taking inventory of what little supplies remained, when she heard the crash. She dropped the ledger, ran to the kitchen, and found one of the shelves pulled clean off the wall. Jars smashed, flour scattered across the floor like dirty snow. No sign of who'd done it. But she knew. Otis appeared in the doorway moments later, his hand on the pistol at his hip. You all right? Fine, just some broken jars. That wasn't an accident. I know. Otis scanned the room, his jaw tight. This is going to get worse before it gets better. Probably. You sure you want to stay? Mara looked at the mess, at the flour coating everything, at the ruined food that could have fed them for days. She thought about running, about walking away from this place and never looking back. Then she grabbed a broom. Yeah, she said, I'm sure. The incidents kept coming. A water barrel tipped over in the night, spilling gallons they couldn't afford to lose. Feed bags slashed open, contents scattered. The vegetable garden she'd been nursing for weeks trampled flat. Nothing dramatic, nothing she could prove. Just steady, relentless sabotage designed to wear her down. The three men Cole had left behind did what they could. Otis, a quiet hand named Marcus, and a kid barely 18 called Sam. They took turns keeping watch, checking the perimeter, trying to catch whoever was causing the damage. But Briggs was smart. He moved when they weren't looking, struck when they were stretched thin, and he had 5 men to their 3. On the 4th day, Mara found Sam unconscious behind the barn, blood crusted on the side of his head. Marcus helped her get him inside, cleaned the wound, but the boy's eyes wouldn't focus right. What happened? Mara asked. Sam tried to answer, winced. Didn't see. Someone came up behind me. Did you recognize them? No, it was dark. He touched his head, grimaced. Someone hit me. Hard. Mara looked at Otis, who stood in the doorway with an expression that said exactly what they were both thinking. This wasn't going to stop. We need to bring Cole back, Marcus said. Tell him what's happening. We can't, Mara said. He's 5 days out by now, maybe more. Even if we sent someone, by the time they found him and got back here, the drive would be over anyway. So what do? We hold the line, keep things running until he gets back. And if Briggs decides to do more than break jars? Mara didn't have an answer for that. That night, she barely slept. Every sound made her sit up, straining to hear if it was wind or footsteps. The ranch felt different in the dark, hostile, threatening, like the land itself had turned against her. She thought about Cole, wondered where he was, if the drive was going well. Wondered if he was thinking about what he'd left behind. Probably not. He had enough to worry about. Around 3 a.m, she gave up on sleep, pulled on her boots, and went to check the kitchen. Everything looked intact. No new damage, no signs of intrusion. She was about to head back to bed when she saw the light. A flicker, just visible through the barn window. Too bright to be a lantern, too steady to be lightning. Fire. Mara ran. She hit the barn door at full speed, shoved it open, and saw flames crawling up the far wall where the hay was stacked. Not huge yet, but growing fast. Hungry. She grabbed a bucket, filled it from the trough outside, threw it at the flames. It barely made a dent. She grabbed another bucket, then another, working frantically. But the fire kept spreading, kept eating through the dry wood and straw like it had been waiting for this moment. Footsteps pounded behind her. Otis burst through the door, took in the scene, cursed, and started hauling water. Marcus arrived seconds later, then Sam, moving slow, still hurt, but moving. Together they formed a chain, passing buckets, throwing water, trying to contain the blaze before it consumed the entire barn. It took an hour. By the time they got it under control, Mara's arms were shaking, her lungs burned from smoke, and half the far wall was charred black. Another 10 minutes and they would have lost everything. She stood in the doorway, breathing hard, staring at the damage. This wasn't sabotage. This was attempted murder. "He tried to kill us," Sam said, his voice shaking. "That fire, if it had spread—" "It didn't," Otis interrupted. "We stopped it. But he'll try again. He's not going to stop until—" "I know." Otis looked at Mara. "We can't keep doing this. We're outnumbered, outgunned. He's just going to wear us down until there's nothing left to defend." "So what do you suggest?" Mara asked. "We take the fight to him." "How?" Otis was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. Finally, he said, "We make him leave." "He won't leave, not unless we force him." "Then we force him." Marcus shook his head. "That's a bad idea. Briggs has men. They're armed. We try to push them out, people are going to die. People are going to die anyway if we just sit here waiting." They all looked at Mara. She thought about Cole, about the promise she'd made to watch the ranch while he was gone, about what he'd say if he came back and found bodies in the yard because she'd started a war she couldn't win. But she also thought about the fire, about Sam's head wound, about the steady campaign of terror Briggs had been waging. "We're not attacking anyone," she said finally, "but we're not sitting here like targets either. We fortify, we keep watch in pairs, and we make damn sure Briggs knows we're not backing down." "That's it?" Sam asked. "We just wait?" "We survive," Mara corrected. "That's the job." The next 3 days were the longest of Mara's life. They fortified what they could, barricaded doors, boarded windows, moved supplies into the main house where they could defend them. They kept watch in shifts, 2 people at a time, weapons close. Briggs didn't attack again, but his presence was constant. She'd see him watching from across the yard, standing in the doorway of the far bunkhouse, always there, always waiting. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. Sam jumped at shadows. Marcus barely spoke. Even Otis, who'd been steady as stone, started to show cracks, sleeping less, snapping more, his hand never far from his gun. Mara kept cooking, kept maintaining routines, but it felt hollow, like they were just going through the motions while something terrible approached. On the 8th day, a rider appeared on the horizon. Everyone scrambled, grabbing weapons, taking positions. Mara's heart hammered as the figure drew closer, dust rising behind the horse. Then she recognized the gait, the slouch in the saddle. Danny. He was alone. Mara ran out to meet him, Otis right behind her. Danny slid off his horse, swaying, and she caught him before he fell. "What happened?" she demanded. "Where's Cole? Where are the others?" Danny's face was gray, his shirt stained with dried blood that wasn't his. He looked like he'd ridden straight through hell and barely made it out. "Stampede!" he gasped. "Third night out. Something spooked the herd, lost control. They went over a ridge, half the cattle, maybe more. Gone." Mara felt her stomach drop. "And the men?" "3 hurt. Cole's alive, but—" Danny swallowed hard. "It's bad. We tried to recover what we could, tried to keep going, but we lost too much. Even if we make it to the rail station now, we won't have enough to cover the debt." "How much short?" "At least 40%, maybe more." The words hit like a physical blow. 40%. They'd risked everything, and they were going to lose anyway. "Where's Cole now?" Otis asked. "Still with the herd. About a week out. He sent me back to warn you. To tell you—" Danny looked at Mara, something broken in his eyes. "To tell you he's sorry, that he tried." Mara helped Danny inside, got him water, made him sit down. His hands shook as he drank. "The stampede," she said quietly. "What caused it?" "Don't know. Could have been anything. Coyotes, thunder, just bad luck?" "Or sabotage." Danny looked up sharply. "You think—" "I think Briggs has men he's loyal to, and I think one of them might have gone on that drive." Otis swore under his breath. "If he sabotaged the herd, then Cole never had a chance," Mara finished. "This was Briggs' plan all along. Let Cole try, let him fail, then swoop in when there's nothing left to take." She stood, paced to the window, stared out at the ranch. At Briggs' bunkhouse, where smoke rose from the chimney and men moved in and out like they owned the place. Because soon they would. "What do we do?" Danny asked. Mara didn't answer immediately. Her mind was racing, turning over possibilities, discarding most of them as soon as they formed. They were out of time, out of options. The bank would come in 3 weeks, maybe less, and they wouldn't have the money to pay. Unless. "How far is Cole from the rail station?" she asked. 4 days, maybe 5. "And how long would it take me to reach him?" Otis stepped forward. "No, whatever you're thinking, how long?" 3 days if you ride hard and don't stop. But Mara, you can't." "I can." She turned to face them. "Cole needs to know what happened here, needs to know about Briggs, and he needs help figuring out what to do next. So we send Danny back. Danny can barely stand. And we need someone here who knows what Cole's up against at the rail station, someone who can think fast if things go wrong. That's suicide. You're one woman riding alone through open country. Anything could happen." "Then I better ride fast." Marcus shook his head. "This is insane." "Maybe. But it's the only move we've got left." Mara looked at each of them. "Cole took a risk on me, pulled me out of that storm, gave me a place here when he didn't have to. I owe him, and I'm not letting this ranch die without a fight." She didn't wait for them to argue, just went to pack supplies, grab what she'd need for the ride. Otis followed her to the door. "You know this probably won't work," he said quietly. "I know. And you're going anyway." "I am." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Then at least take this." He handed her a pistol, small, worn, but well-maintained. "I don't know how to shoot," Mara admitted. "Then you better hope you don't have to." Otis showed her how to load it, how to aim, how to fire. "It's got 6 shots. Make them count if it comes to that." Mara tucked the gun into her belt, felt the weight of it against her hip. Foreign, dangerous, necessary. She saddled the fastest horse they had left, loaded her pack, and swung up into the saddle. The ranch spread out before her, broken fences, dying land, a place that had taken everything from the people who loved it and still demanded more. But it was worth fighting for, had to be. She kicked the horse into motion and didn't look back. The first day was brutal. Mara rode until her legs cramped and her back screamed, pushing the horse harder than she should have. But she didn't have a choice. Every hour mattered. Every mile brought her closer to Cole, or further into danger. The land was empty, hostile. Nothing but scrub brush and rocks and heat that pressed down like a physical thing. She saw no one, heard nothing but wind and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. By nightfall, she was exhausted. She made camp in a shallow ravine, built no fire, ate cold jerky and stale bread. The horse stood nearby, head down, breathing hard. Mara wrapped herself in a blanket and tried to sleep, but her mind wouldn't stop racing. She kept thinking about Cole, about the stampede, about what would happen if she didn't reach him in time, about what would happen even if she did. The second day was worse. Her muscles ached, the horse was flagging, moving slower despite her urging, and the sun was merciless, beating down until she felt like her skin might crack and peel. She stopped twice to rest, to water the horse from the canteen she'd brought. Each time she felt the minutes slipping away, felt the weight of everything pressing down. Keep moving, just keep moving. Around midday, she spotted dust on the horizon. A lot of it. Moving fast. Riders. Mara's first instinct was to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The land was flat, exposed. If they'd seen her, running would only make her look guilty. So she kept riding, hand near the pistol, heart hammering. The riders resolved into 3 men on horseback. They pulled up as she approached, spread out to block her path. "Well now," one of them said, a tall man with a scar across his cheek. "What do we have here?" "Just passing through," Mara said, keeping her voice steady. "Passing through to where?" "North. Meeting someone." "In kind of a hurry, aren't you?" "Business doesn't wait." The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "See? That's interesting, because we're on business too. Looking for someone. Woman, traveling alone, heavy set, riding a bay mare." Mara's blood went cold. Briggs had sent them. "Haven't seen anyone like that," she said. "No?" The man's smile widened. "Because you look an awful lot like the description we got." His hand moved toward his gun. Mara didn't think, just reacted. She kicked the horse hard, yanked the reins, and bolted. Shouts erupted behind her, hoofbeats, the crack of a gunshot, loud and close, and she ducked low in the saddle, urging the horse faster. Another shot, then another. The horse stumbled, caught itself, kept running. Mara's hands were shaking so bad she could barely hold the reins, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The men were gaining. She could hear them, feel them closing the distance. She pulled the pistol from her belt, twisted in the saddle, fired blind. The recoil nearly threw her off the horse. The shot went wide, hit nothing. But it made the men slow. Just for a second, it was enough. Mara spotted a cluster of rocks ahead, rode straight for them, slid off the horse before it even stopped. She scrambled into cover, pressed her back against stone, listened to the pounding hoofbeats circle around. "Come on out," the scarred man called. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Mara checked her pistol. 5 shots left. "Briggs sent you," she called back. "Smart girl." "What did he promise you?" "Enough to make it worth our time." "And what happens when Cole finds out? When he comes back and learns Briggs sent men to hunt me down?" "Cole's not coming back. His drive's finished. His ranch is done. All we're doing is cleaning up loose ends." Mara's jaw tightened. "I'm not a loose end." "Sure you are. You're the woman who convinced Cole to throw away his last shot, who turned his men against Briggs, who's been causing trouble since the day you arrived." The man's voice moved, circling. "Briggs says you're dangerous, says you won't stop until you've burned everything down." "Briggs is lying." "Don't matter. We've got our orders." Mara heard footsteps, boots on rock, moving closer. She gripped the pistol tighter, tried to remember what Otis had taught her. Aim center mass. Don't jerk the trigger. Breathe. The first man appeared around the rocks. Mara fired. The shot caught him in the shoulder, spun him around. He went down cursing, clutching the wound. The other 2 scattered, took cover. "You just made a big mistake," the scarred man shouted. "Then come get me," Mara shouted back. Silence. Then movement. Fast. They came from both sides at once. Mara fired twice more, hitting nothing, and then hands grabbed her, yanked the pistol away. She fought, threw an elbow, felt it connect with something solid, heard a grunt of pain. But there were too many of them. They dragged her out into the open, shoved her to the ground. The scarred man stood over her, bleeding from a cut on his lip where she'd hit him. "You got spirit," he said. "I'll give you that." He raised his gun, and a rifle shot echoed across the flatland. The scarred man's hat flew off his head. He spun, eyes wide, searching for the shooter. Another shot, closer this time, deliberate. "Next one's in your chest," a voice called out. Cole stepped out from behind a ridge, rifle leveled, his face hard as granite. Behind him, Danny and Caleb appeared, also armed. The scarred man looked at his companions, at Cole, at Mara on the ground. Then he lowered his gun. "Smart choice," Cole said. "Now get on your horses and ride. Tell Briggs if he sends anyone else, I'll bury them where they fall." The men didn't argue, just mounted up and disappeared into the distance. Cole lowered the rifle, walked over to Mara, pulled her to her feet. "You all right?" he asked. Mara nodded, still shaking. "How did you—" "Danny told us you'd left. I pushed ahead, figured you'd be heading this way." He looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "You rode 3 days alone to find me?" "Had to warn you. About Briggs, about the sabotage." "I know about the sabotage." Cole's jaw tightened. One of his men admitted it after the stampede. Said Briggs paid him to spook the herd. "We beat the truth out of him, left him tied to a tree for the coyotes." "Then you know we're finished. The drive's ruined." "Not ruined, just short." Cole glanced back at Danny and Caleb. "We're still pushing to the rail station, still selling what we've got. It won't be enough to cover the full debt, but it'll be something." "Something isn't enough. The bank won't—" "I know." Cole's voice was flat, exhausted. "But we're out of options. We sell what we can, take what money we get, and figure out the rest when we get back." Mara looked at him, really looked. He was thinner than when he'd left, his face drawn, his eyes shadowed. This drive had taken everything he had and left him with nothing but scraps. But he was still moving, still fighting. "There might be another way," Mara said quietly. "What way?" "Briggs has been skimming, stealing supplies, money, whatever he could get his hands on. It's been going on for months. I know. I saw the books. But do you know where he's keeping it? Cole paused. No. Then we find it. We get back what he stole, combine it with whatever you make from the drive, and we make the payment. That's a long shot. It's the only shot we've got left. Cole stared at her, and Mara could see him turning it over, weighing the risks. Then, slowly, he nodded. All right. You get back to the ranch, find the money. I'll finish the drive. Meet you there in a week. And if I can't find it? Cole's expression hardened. Then we lose everything. Mara rode back to Iron Ridge like the devil himself was chasing her. Her body screamed for rest. The horse was half dead from exhaustion. But she pushed anyway, because every hour counted, and Briggs would already know his men had failed, which meant he'd be planning something worse. The landscape blurred past her, endless scrub and dust and heat. Her mind kept circling back to Cole's face when she'd left him, the exhaustion in his eyes, the resignation, like he'd already accepted defeat and was just going through the motions. But Mara hadn't accepted anything. She'd spent too long being overlooked, being dismissed, being told she didn't matter. Iron Ridge had given her something she'd never had before, a purpose that went beyond just surviving day to day, and she'd be damned if she let Briggs take that away without a fight. The sun was just cresting the horizon when she finally spotted the ranch. From a distance, it looked almost peaceful. Smoke rising from chimneys, cattle moving in the near pasture, like nothing had changed. But Mara knew better. She reached the yard and slid off the horse before it fully stopped, her legs buckling. She caught herself against the fence, took a breath, forced herself upright. Otis appeared from the barn, his rifle slung over his shoulder. When he saw her, relief flooded his face. Thank Christ, he muttered, jogging over. He grabbed her elbow, steadied her. Did you find him? Yeah. Cole's alive, finishing the drive. Mara's voice was hoarse from 3 days of dust and shouting over wind. But we're still short. We need to find what Briggs stole. Otis's expression darkened. We've been looking, tore through the bunkhouse while they were out working, found nothing. Then we're looking in the wrong place. Sam appeared from the house, moving better now, the wound on his head healing to an ugly purple bruise. Briggs hasn't left the ranch in days. Just sits in that bunkhouse, waiting. It's like he knows something we don't. Mara's jaw tightened, because Briggs did know something. He knew his hired guns hadn't come back, knew Cole was still alive, knew the window was closing, and he was waiting to see what she'd do next. Where's Marcus? Mara asked. Watching the north fence, making sure Briggs doesn't try anything while we're spread thin. Get him back here and tell him to bring tools. We're going to tear this place apart until we find where Briggs has been hiding his stash. Otis hesitated. You sure about this? If we push too hard, Briggs is going to do whatever he's planning, whether we push or not. At least this way, we're not sitting here waiting for him to make the first move. They started with the obvious places. The far bunkhouse where Briggs and his men stayed. They waited until the men rode out for the day's work. Briggs watching them go with that same cold calculation in his eyes, then moved in fast. Marcus pulled up floorboards while Sam checked the rafters. Otis went through every trunk, every corner, every possible hiding spot. Mara searched the walls, looking for loose panels or hidden compartments. Nothing. He's too smart to keep it here, Marcus said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Too obvious. Maybe, Mara agreed, but we check anyway. They moved to the barn next. It took hours. They sifted through hay, checked every stall, examined every beam and post. Marcus even climbed into the loft, searching through old equipment and rotting leather that had been up there since before Cole's wife died. Still nothing. By noon, Mara's hands were shaking from exhaustion and frustration. They were running out of places to look, running out of time. The bank would be here in less than 3 weeks, and without that missing money, all of Cole's efforts, all of their efforts, would mean nothing. Maybe he doesn't keep it here, Sam suggested again, his voice uncertain. Maybe he buried it somewhere out on the range, or took it to town, put it in a bank under a false name. No. Mara shook her head, thinking it through. He'd want it close, want to be able to check on it, make sure it's safe, control it. That's what this is about for him, control. She stood in the yard, turned slowly, studying the ranch with fresh eyes. Trying to think like Briggs. Where would a man who needed to feel powerful hide something valuable if he wanted it protected but accessible? Where would he put it to prove his dominance? Her gaze landed on the main house, on Cole's office. The audacity of it hit her like a physical blow. Of course that's where he'd hide it, right under Cole's nose, right in the heart of Cole's territory. It was the ultimate insult, stealing from a man while sitting in his own office, looking through his papers, pretending to help while bleeding him dry. "Son of a bitch," Mara whispered. She ran. The office was exactly as Cole had left it, papers scattered across the desk, ledgers stacked in corners, dust coating everything. It smelled stale, like old tobacco and older grief. Mara tore through drawers, pulled books off shelves, checked behind paintings that had been hanging there since Cole's father owned the place. Otis joined her moments later. "What are we looking for?" "A safe, a false panel, something, anything." Mara knocked on walls, listening for hollow spots. Briggs had access to this room for 2 years. If he wanted to hide something right under Cole's nose, her knuckles hit a section of wall that sounded different, hollow. She grabbed a knife from her belt, worked it into the seam where the paneling met, and pried. The wood resisted, then gave way with a crack. The panel came loose, revealing a small cavity behind it. Inside was a metal box, plain, unadorned, locked. Mara pulled it out, her hands shaking now for a different reason. This was it. Had to be. The lock was simple, built for privacy, not security. She worked the knife into it, twisted, and felt something give. The lock broke, and she opened the lid. Cash. A lot of it. Stacks of bills bound with twine, organized by denomination, and underneath the cash, a ledger. Mara pulled out the book, flipped through the pages, and felt her stomach sink with every entry. Dates, amounts, transactions going back 18 months, every theft documented in neat, precise handwriting, supplies sold without authorization, cattle traded at below market value with the difference pocketed. Even wages. Money meant for the hands that had mysteriously gone missing over the months. Briggs hadn't just been skimming. He'd been systematically looting the ranch while playing the role of loyal foreman. "How much is there?" Otis asked, looking over her shoulder. Mara counted quickly, her mind racing through the numbers. "Maybe $300. Maybe a little more. Is that enough? Combined with what Cole makes from the drive?" Mara did the math in her head, factoring in the reduced herd size, the costs of the journey, the market prices. It might be. It's close, real close. She closed the box, looked at Otis. His face was grim. "This is going to get ugly," he said. "When Briggs realizes we found his stash, I know. He's not going to just walk away. He's got men loyal to him, and they're armed. I know that too. So what do we do?" Mara thought about Cole, riding north with what was left of his herd. Thought about Danny's face when he told her about the stampede. Thought about how close they'd all come to losing everything. "We hide this," she said, "somewhere Briggs won't think to look, and we prepare for what's coming." They moved the box to the kitchen, Mara's territory, the one place Briggs had never fully controlled. She buried it in a flour barrel in the back of the pantry, then scattered flour over the top to make it look undisturbed. Not perfect, but better than leaving it in Cole's office where Briggs might come looking once he realized something was wrong. Then they gathered what weapons they had. 2 rifles, 3 pistols, a shotgun that might fire if you held it right. Not much of an arsenal, but it would have to do. Marcus came back from the north fence, took one look at their faces, and knew something had changed. "What happened?" he asked. "We found Briggs' stash," Otis said. $300, maybe more, hidden in Cole's office. Marcus let out a low whistle. "He know you found it?" "Not yet, but he will." "Then we need to be ready." They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Barricading the main house, moving supplies inside where they could defend them, checking ammunition, making sure everyone knew their positions if it came to a fight. Sam was pale, his hand shaking as he loaded the shotgun. He was just a kid, really. Shouldn't be preparing for a gunfight, should be somewhere safe, learning a trade, building a life. But the frontier didn't care what people should be doing. Mara put a hand on his shoulder. "You doing all right?" "Yeah, I think so." Sam's voice cracked slightly. I've been in scraps, but not I know, neither have I. Not like this. What if it goes wrong? What if we... Then we deal with it. But we don't run. Not now. Not after everything we've been through. Sam nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Briggs returned at dusk with his men, 5 of them, all hard-looking, all armed. They moved into the bunkhouse without a word, without even glancing toward the main house where Mara and the others watched from behind curtained windows. But Mara could feel the tension ratcheting up, could sense something building like the pressure before a storm. He knows, Marcus said quietly, standing beside her. About the money. How could he? We just found it a few hours ago. Doesn't matter how. Look at him. Mara looked. Briggs stood in the doorway of the bunkhouse, staring directly at the main house, directly at the window where she stood, not angry, not worried, just watching, like a predator that had finally cornered its prey and was savoring the moment before the kill. He's going to come tonight, Otis said from across the room. Can't let us sit on that money. Can't risk us getting it to Cole or using it to pay the bank. So we'll be ready, Mara said, though her mouth was dry and her heart was pounding hard enough to make her ribs ache. Night fell like a curtain dropping. Mara sat in the kitchen with the pistol on the table, listening to every creak, every whisper of wind through the gaps in the walls. Otis and Marcus took shifts outside, keeping watch from different positions. Sam stayed in the house, pale but determined, the shotgun across his lap. The hours crawled past. Midnight came and went, then 1 in the morning, then 2. Mara's eyes burned from exhaustion, but she didn't dare close them. Couldn't afford to miss the moment when... Voices. Low. Urgent. Coming from outside. She grabbed the pistol, moved to the window, peered through a gap in the curtain. Briggs and his men were gathered in the yard, talking in hushed tones lit by a single lantern. One of them gestured toward the main house. Another shook his head, clearly arguing. Briggs said something Mara couldn't hear, and the arguing stopped. The men dispersed, moving to positions around the property, surrounding the house, boxing them in. They're coming, Mara said, her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. Otis burst through the door, rifle in hand, breathing hard. They're spreading out, looks like they're planning to hit us from multiple sides at once. How many? All 5, plus Briggs. 6 total. 6 against 4. And Sam was barely functional, still recovering from his head wound. The math wasn't good. Mara felt ice settle in her stomach, but her hand stayed steady as she checked the pistol. 5 shots left. She'd have to make every single one count. We can't fight them head on, Marcus said, appearing from the back room where he'd been watching the rear approach. Not with those numbers. We're outgunned, outmanned. Then we don't fight fair, Mara interrupted. An idea was forming, reckless, probably stupid, but it was all they had. She looked at Otis. Can you get to the barn without being seen? Maybe. Depends on where they've positioned themselves. Why? Because if Briggs wants to surround us, we're going to give him something else to think about, something loud. She told them the plan. Marcus shook his head immediately. Otis looked skeptical. Sam just stared at her like she'd lost her mind. That's insane, Marcus said. You'll never... You got a better idea? Silence. Then we do it my way, Mara said. Otis, can you make it to the barn? He studied the yard through the window, calculating angles and distances. Yeah, I can make it, but once I light that fire, all hell's gonna break loose. That's the idea. Otis nodded slowly, checked his rifle one more time. All right, give me 5 minutes to get in position, then do whatever you're gonna do. He slipped out the back door, disappeared into the darkness like a ghost. Mara turned to Marcus and Sam. You two hold the house. Anyone tries to come through, you stop them. Don't worry about me. What are you gonna do? Sam asked. Something stupid. The first sound was a crash, glass breaking in one of the bedrooms upstairs, then footsteps on the porch, heavy, deliberate. Then Briggs' voice, loud and clear, cutting through the night. You've got one chance to walk out of there alive, Mara. Send out the woman and the money, and we'll let the rest of you go. Mara moved to the door, stood just out of sight in the shadows. Her hands were sweating on the pistol grip. You really think I'm stupid enough to believe that? She called back. I think you're smart enough to know when you've lost. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and Cole's not coming back in time to save you, so you can either die in there, or you can walk out and take your chances. Funny thing about chances, Briggs. I've been taking them my whole life. One more won't kill me. Yes, it will. That's exactly what it'll do. Mara glanced at Marcus, who gave a slight nod. Otis should be in position by now. You want the money? Mara called out. Come get it. Silence. Heavy. Pregnant with violence. Then movement. Fast. Two of Briggs' men rushed the front door, weapons raised. Marcus fired. The rifle shot deafening in the enclosed space. One of the men went down, clutching his leg. The other dove for cover. Footsteps pounded up the back stairs. Sam's shotgun roared, and there was a scream, a crash, someone falling. Then the barn exploded into flames. Not the whole barn, just the section where Otis had piled old straw and hay, doused it with lamp oil from the stores they'd salvaged. But it was enough. Bright. Loud. Impossible to ignore. The flames leaped up into the night sky, casting everything in flickering orange light. Briggs spun toward the fire, cursing, and his men hesitated, torn between the attack and the new threat. In that moment of chaos, Mara moved. She burst through the front door, pistol raised, and fired at the nearest man. The shot went wide. Her hands were shaking more than she'd thought, but it made him dive for cover behind a water trough. She ran for the barn, using the smoke and confusion as cover. Behind her, she heard Marcus and Sam firing from the house, keeping the other men pinned. Otis appeared from behind the blazing section of barn, his face streaked with soot. This way! They circled around, came up behind Briggs' position near the well. He was crouched there, reloading his rifle, focused on the house. He didn't see Mara until she pressed the pistol against the back of his head. Drop it, she said, her voice shaking but firm. Briggs froze. Then, slowly, he set his rifle down in the dirt. You're making a mistake, he said, his voice eerily calm. No, I'm finishing one. Mara raised her voice, calling out over the chaos. Tell your men to stand down, now, or I pull this trigger and we see how loyal they are to a dead man. Briggs was silent for a long moment. She could feel him calculating, weighing his options. Now, Briggs, stand down, he called out, his voice carrying across the yard. All of you, stand down. One by one, the shooting stopped. The men emerged from cover, hands raised, looking uncertain. Otis moved in with Marcus, collecting their weapons. Sam came out of the house, still holding the shotgun, his face white but determined. Mara kept the gun on Briggs. Her arm was starting to shake from holding it extended for so long, but she didn't lower it. Where's the rest of it? She asked. Rest of what? Don't play games. I found your stash in Cole's office. But the ledger shows more. A lot more. Where is it? Briggs smiled, cold, humorless, infuriating. You think that was all of it? That box was just insurance, walking away money. The real stash, the money I've been saving for 2 years, that's already gone. Safe. Somewhere you'll never find it. Gone where? Somewhere smart. Somewhere secure. He twisted slightly, looked up at her. You can shoot me. Won't change anything. Cole's drive failed. Even with what you found, you don't have enough to cover the debt. And in 2 weeks, the bank's going to take everything anyway. All you did was delay the inevitable. Mara's finger tightened on the trigger. It would be so easy. One shot. End this. End him. But she didn't. Because Briggs was right about one thing. Killing him wouldn't solve the problem. Wouldn't save the ranch. Would just add one more body to a place that had already seen too much death. Tie them up, she told Otis, slowly lowering the gun. All of them. Lock them in the far bunkhouse until Cole gets back. And then what? Marcus asked, binding Briggs' hands with rope. What do we do with them? Then Cole decides. It's his ranch, his call. They secured all 6 men in the bunkhouse, posted guards, and spent the rest of the night putting out the fire before it spread beyond the section of barn they'd deliberately sacrificed. By dawn, everyone was exhausted, covered in soot, running on adrenaline and not much else. But they'd survived. Mara sat on the porch steps as the sun rose, watching the smoke still rising from the charred barn timbers. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Now that the danger had passed, her body was finally catching up to everything that had happened. Otis sat down beside her, handed her a canteen. You did good. We got lucky. Luck's part of it, but so is guts. You've got more of that than anyone I've ever met. Mara took a long drink, then passed the canteen back. You think Cole will make it back in time? If anyone can, he will. And if he doesn't? Otis was quiet for a moment. Then we figure something else out. That's what we've been doing all along, isn't it? Cole returned 5 days later. Mara saw the dust cloud first, then the riders emerging from it. Cole at the front, slouched in the saddle, looking half dead but alive. Danny and Caleb behind him, exhausted but intact. A handful of other men bringing up the rear, driving what was left of the herd. Not many cattle, maybe 30 head, maybe a third of what they'd started with. But they'd made it. Cole dismounted slowly, like every bone in his body hurt. He took in the burnt section of barn, the boarded windows, Otis standing guard over the locked bunkhouse where Briggs and his men were still being held. "What the hell happened here?" he asked, his voice rough. "Briggs happened," Mara said, walking over to meet him. "But we handled it." She told him everything. The search for the money, finding the stash in his office, the attack, the fire, the standoff, all of it, holding nothing back. Cole listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time, just standing there in the yard, processing. Finally, he spoke. "How much did we make from the drive?" $240. After expenses, after replacing gear, after covering the costs of the hands who got injured. His voice was flat, defeated. "We lost too many cattle. Even at good prices, it wasn't enough." Mara did the math quickly in her head. The money from Briggs' stash, $300 plus the drive proceeds, $240, $540 total, against a debt of $600. Still short, $60 short. Not much in the grand scheme of things, but it might as well have been $600. The bank didn't care about almost, didn't care about effort or sacrifice. They cared about the full amount, on time, no excuses. "It's not enough," Cole said, confirming what she already knew. His shoulders sagged. "We're still about $60 short, maybe more depending on what other debts come due." Then we find $60. "From where, Mara? We've got nothing left to sell. No more cattle worth anything. No equipment that isn't already mortgaged. No, we've got land." Cole looked at her sharply. "What?" "We've got land. Good land. We sell a piece. Small. Just enough to cover the difference." "You want me to sell part of the ranch to save the ranch?" His voice rose slightly, anger and disbelief mixing together. "I want you to do whatever it takes to survive. That's what we've been doing all along, isn't it? Making hard choices, sacrificing what we can afford to lose to keep what matters. And what makes you think I can afford to lose any of this land? My father built this place. My grandfather before him. Every acre matters. And all those acres won't mean anything if the bank takes them." Mara stepped closer, held his gaze. "You've already lost your wife, lost 2 years to grief, almost lost this whole place because you were too stubborn or too broken to fight. Don't lose it now because you're too proud to make one more sacrifice." Cole stared at her, and she could see the war happening behind his eyes. Pride fighting desperation, history fighting necessity, legacy fighting survival. Finally, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "All right, but we do this right. We find a buyer who'll pay fair price, someone who's not going to try to take advantage when they smell desperation." "I know someone," Otis said, walking over. "Neighbor to the east, man named Harrison. Been wanting to expand his grazing land for years. He's honest. Won't cheat you. Might even give you first right to buy it back when you're on better footing." "Set it up," Cole said quietly. "Fast. We've only got 2 weeks." The deal took 3 days to finalize. Harrison came out the next afternoon, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and a handshake that meant something. He walked the land Cole was offering, checked the fencing, the water access, the quality of the grass, asked questions, made calculations in a worn notebook. Finally, he made an offer. It was fair, not generous. Harrison was a businessman, not a charity, but fair, enough to cover the gap with a little left over. Maybe $5 or $10 extra. Cole stood at the fence line, staring out at the section he was about to sell. Mara stood beside him, giving him space to process. "My grandfather cleared this land," Cole said quietly. "Built the first fence here with his own hands. My father expanded it. And now I'm selling it to cover my own failures." "You're not failing, you're surviving. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yeah, failure is giving up. This is adapting. It's what you have to do to keep the rest. Cole was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded, just a small dip of his chin. All right, let's do it before I change my mind. They signed the papers in Cole's office. Harrison wrote out a bank draft for the full amount, shook Cole's hand again, and left with a promise to respect the land as Cole's family had. Cole watched him go, then sat down heavily at his desk. His hands were shaking as he added the bank draft to the pile of cash, Briggs' stolen money and the proceeds from the drive. $605, he said, his voice hollow. That's what we've got. That's what 2 years of hell and sacrifice comes down to. $605. It's enough, Mara said. That's what matters. Is it? Cole looked up at her, something broken in his eyes. I sold land my family held for 3 generations. I drove what was left of my herd into the ground. I nearly got you killed. All for $605 and the privilege of doing it all over again next season. You saved the ranch. Did I? Or did I just buy myself more time to watch it die slower? Mara pulled up a chair, sat down across from him. Listen to me. You saved this place. Not because you found the money or made the right deals. You saved it because you finally decided to fight. Because you stopped running from your grief and started running towards something. That matters, Cole. It matters a lot. I couldn't have done it without you. Maybe not, but I couldn't have done it without you either. Without this place. Without... She paused, choosing her words carefully. Without something worth fighting for. Cole studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. What do we do about Briggs? He asked. They brought him out of the bunkhouse the next morning. Briggs looked smaller than Mara remembered. Diminished. 5 days locked up with nothing to do but think had taken some of the swagger out of him. But his eyes were still hard, still calculating. Cole stood in front of him, arms crossed. Mara stayed beside him, a united front. You've got 2 choices, Cole said, his voice cold and flat. You leave now, on foot, with nothing but the clothes on your back. Or I turn you over to the sheriff in town, let him sort out the theft, the sabotage, the attempted murder. Let a judge decide what happens to you. Sheriff won't do anything, Briggs said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. I know people, have connections. You think you can just... I don't care about your connections. Cole's voice hardened. I don't care about your threats or your deals or whatever else you think you've got waiting for you. You're done here. So you pick, leave now and take your chances out there, or face a trial where every man on this ranch will testify against you. Briggs stared at him, and for a moment Mara thought he might actually fight, might try one last desperate play. But then something broke in his face. The calculation, the confidence. All of it crumbled, and what was left was just a man who'd gambled everything and lost. I'll leave, he said quietly. Cole nodded to Otis, who cut the ropes binding Briggs' hands. He rubbed his wrists, looked at his men, still tied up, watching him with expressions that ranged from betrayal to relief. What about them? Briggs asked. That's up to them. They want to work, really work. They can stay. They want to follow you. They go with you. Their choice. One by one, the men chose. 2 decided to stay, swearing they'd been coerced, that they'd just been following orders. The other 3 chose to leave with Briggs. It was probably a lie. Most of them had known exactly what they were doing, but Cole needed hands, and they needed work, and sometimes survival meant accepting compromise. Briggs looked at Cole one more time. This isn't over. Yeah, Cole said, his voice tired but final. It is. Briggs walked away across the empty land, his 3 men following, and nobody stopped him. Mara watched until they were just specks on the horizon, then disappeared completely into the heat shimmer. Think we'll see him again? Otis asked. Hope not, Cole said. But probably. The bank representative arrived exactly 2 weeks later, right on schedule. A thin man in a suit that looked expensive but was starting to show wear at the elbows. He carried a leather case and had the pinched expression of someone who'd ridden too far in too much heat and wasn't happy about it. His name was Pritchard. He sat across from Cole in the office, opened his ledger with careful precision, ran his finger down the columns of numbers. You're aware of the outstanding debt, he said without preamble. I am. And you're prepared to settle the full amount today? I am. Cole placed the money on the desk. Every dollar they'd scraped together. The drive proceeds. Briggs's stolen stash recovered. The land sale to Harrison. All of it. $605. Pritchard counted slowly, methodically, making notes in his ledger. He counted twice, checking his work. When he finished, he looked up at Cole. This covers it, he said, and there might have been the slightest hint of surprise in his voice. In full. With $5 over. Cole exhaled, long, slow, like he'd been holding his breath for months. Years, maybe. The ranch is yours, Pritchard continued, stamping documents, signing forms. Clear and free. No outstanding liens, no further obligations to the bank. He packed up his case, stood, extended his hand. Congratulations, Mr. Mercer. Not many men can say they beat odds like these. They shook. Pritchard left, his wagon disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Cole sat down heavily in his chair, put his head in his hands. For a long moment, he just sat there, breathing. Mara stood in the doorway, watching, giving him space. It's done, Cole said finally, his voice muffled by his hands. Yeah, Mara said. It's done. Cole looked up at her, and his eyes were red but dry. I couldn't have done this without you. You know that, right? You did the hard part. The drive, the decisions, the hard part was letting someone help. Cole's voice cracked slightly. I've been running this place alone for 2 years. Pushed everyone away. Let Briggs take control because it was easier than fighting, than admitting I couldn't do it by myself. And you... He stopped, shook his head. You showed up out of nowhere and refused to let me quit. Refused to let this place die. Refused to accept that some debts can't be repaid. I owed you my life. No, you didn't. I pulled you out of a storm. That's not a debt. That's just... He gestured vaguely. That's just what you do. You don't let people die if you can help it. Then maybe what I did wasn't about debt either. Maybe it was just what you do when you find a place worth saving. Cole stood, moved to the window, stared out at the ranch, at the burnt section of barn they'd have to rebuild, at the fences that still needed repair, at the cattle grazing in the near pasture. Too few of them, but alive. What happens now? Mara asked. Now. Cole turned to face her. Now we rebuild. Fix what's broken. Restock the herd, start over, but different this time. Different how? I meant what I said to the men before the drive. They're partners. They worked, they bled, they risked everything. They get a share of whatever we make going forward, not just wages. Real stakes in this place. That's not how most ranches work. Then we'll be different. Cole's jaw set with determination. You were right about that. About giving people a reason to stay. A reason to fight. If Iron Ridge is going to survive long term, it can't just be me holding it together by sheer stubbornness. He crossed the room, stood in front of her. I want you to stay, he said. Not as the cook. Not as someone paying off a debt that never existed. As... He hesitated, searching for the right words. As a partner. As someone who has as much stake in this place as I do. Because that's what you've earned. That's what you've proven. Mara looked at him, really looked. At the lines around his eyes that grief and stress had carved deep. At the gray in his hair that hadn't been there 2 years ago. At the weight he still carried but was maybe, finally, starting to set down. He wasn't offering romance, wasn't offering anything easy or simple. He was offering partnership, equality. A place to belong that had nothing to do with debt or obligation and everything to do with respect. I'll stay, Mara said. On one condition. What's that? You open that kitchen, for real this time. No more keeping it sealed. No more treating it like a tomb. If we're starting over, we start fresh. All of us. Cole's jaw tightened, and for a moment Mara thought he might refuse, thought the grief might still be too strong, the memory too painful. But then he nodded. Deal. The next morning, Mara propped open every window in the kitchen. Light flooded in, chasing away 2 years of darkness and decay. She cleaned every surface, aired out every corner, scrubbed until her hands were raw, and the place looked almost new. Almost alive again. She found things as she cleaned, small things. A woman's apron hanging on a hook, faded but carefully mended. A recipe card in neat handwriting tucked into a cookbook. A child's drawing of the ranch, yellowed with age, pinned to the wall behind the pantry door. Evidence of the life that had existed here before. The woman who'd built this kitchen into something more than just a place to cook. The family that had filled these spaces with warmth and noise and purpose. Mara didn't take any of it down, didn't hide it or pack it away, just incorporated it into what she was building. Let the past exist alongside the present. Then she started cooking. Not just breakfast for the hands. A real meal. Multiple courses. Bread that filled the house with yeast and warmth. A stew that simmered for hours until the smell drifted across the entire yard. Biscuits that came out of the oven, golden and perfect. The men started arriving before she even called them. Drawn by the smell. By something they'd been missing without even knowing it. They filed in slowly, uncertain. The kitchen had been closed for so long that most of them had never seen it functional, had never experienced what it was meant to be. They took plates, filled them, found seats at the long table, or stood leaning against walls. And they ate. Silence at first. Just the sound of forks and knives and quiet appreciation. Then Otis spoke up. "This is good, real good. Best meal I've had in, hell, I don't know how long." "Since before," Danny said quietly. "Since before everything went wrong." Others nodded. A few smiled. And for the first time in 2 years, the kitchen was full of men, full of life, full of the possibility that maybe things could be different. Cole appeared in the doorway, hesitated, then stepped inside. The conversations died down. Everyone watched him, waiting to see what he'd do, waiting to see if the grief would pull him back out again. But Cole grabbed a plate, filled it with food, and sat down at the table. Not at the head, just somewhere in the middle, surrounded by his men. The conversations resumed cautiously at first, then with more confidence. Men talked about the work that needed doing, about plans for spring planting, about stock they'd need to acquire, normal things, future things. Mara watched from the stove and felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly, not peace, but something close, something that felt like the beginning of healing. 3 months later, Iron Ridge was unrecognizable. The fences were rebuilt, stronger than before. The burnt section of barn was torn down and reconstructed, this time with better ventilation and fire safety in mind. New cattle grazed in pastures that had been empty for years, bought with careful loans that Cole was determined to pay off early. The men worked with purpose now, not just exhaustion. They talked, laughed, made plans that extended beyond the next week or month, because they had stakes in the outcome, had reasons to care beyond just a paycheck. Word spread. Drifters started showing up at the property line, asking for work. Some Cole turned away. He could sense the ones who were just looking for easy money, who wouldn't last when things got hard. But others he brought on, after careful vetting, after making sure they understood what Iron Ridge was becoming. Not just a ranch, a community. The kitchen became the heart of it. Mara expanded operations, taught a few of the younger hands how to cook basic meals, started preserving more food for winter. Built up reserves they'd never had before. She also started taking on more responsibilities beyond the kitchen. Working with Cole on supply ordering, helping negotiate deals with suppliers, managing the household accounts. Partnership, in every sense of the word. Cole threw himself into the work with a focus that bordered on obsession, but it was different now. He wasn't running from grief anymore. Wasn't hiding in the range to avoid facing what he'd lost. He was building toward something, toward a future that honored the past without being trapped by it. One afternoon in early December, Mara found him in the barn, repairing a stall door that had warped over the summer. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Always." He set down his tools, wiped his hands on his pants. She pulled out the ledger she'd been maintaining, detailed accounts of every dollar that came in and went out. "We're ahead. For the first time in years, we're actually making a profit." Cole studied the columns, his expression carefully neutral. "How much?" "Enough to restock the full herd by spring, maybe even hire another 2 hands if we need them, and still have emergency reserves." "That's..." He stopped, shook his head like he couldn't quite believe it. "I didn't think we'd ever get here." "We almost didn't." Cole set down the ledger, looked at her. "Thank you for not giving up on this place. On me. You never gave up either. You just needed someone to remind you why you were fighting. I needed more than that. I needed, he paused, choosing words carefully. I needed someone to care about this place as much as I do. Someone who saw what it could be, not just what it was. Mara felt her throat tighten. It's a good place. Worth saving. Yeah, it is. Cole smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes. And it's better with you here. They stood there in comfortable silence, the kind that only came from months of working side by side, making decisions together, building something neither of them could have built alone. You ever regret it? Cole asked. Staying? Putting down roots? Mara thought about the question seriously, thought about the storm that had nearly killed her, about Cole pulling her from the dust, about the debt she'd thought she owed. No, she said finally. I don't regret it, not even a little. Good, because I don't know what the hell we would have done without you. Winter came hard that year. Snow blanketed the ranch in white. Temperatures dropped until water froze in the troughs overnight, and the work became brutal. But they were prepared, had food stored, had shelter reinforced, had plans in place for every contingency. The men weathered it together, taking turns with the hard jobs, sharing the burden. Nobody went hungry. Nobody froze. Nobody broke under the strain, because they were invested, because they had reasons to endure. Mara spent the long winter evenings in the kitchen, cooking and planning, and occasionally just sitting by the stove with a book, enjoying the warmth and the quiet. Cole would join her sometimes, working through paperwork or just sitting in companionable silence. They talked about plans for spring, about expanding operations, about maybe trying their hand at breeding horses in addition to cattle, about all the possibilities that lay ahead now that they weren't just fighting to survive. One night, Cole said something that surprised her. You know what the best part is? What? We're not done yet. This place, it's still growing, still changing, still becoming something. Mara smiled. Yeah, I guess it is. And I think, he paused, looked at her. I think that's what makes it worth it. Not just surviving, but building towards something. Having something to work for beyond just making it through another day. Is that what we're doing? Building? Yeah, I think so. Cole was quiet for a moment. My wife, she would have liked what you've done here, what we've done. She always believed this place could be more than just a business, could be something that mattered to people. It was the first time he'd talked about his wife directly, without pain twisting his features. The grief was still there. Mara could see it in his eyes, but it was softer now, more like memory than wound. I wish I could have met her, Mara said honestly. She would have liked you, would have appreciated what you've brought here. They fell into silence again, watching the fire in the stove, and Mara realized something she'd been too busy to notice before. She was happy. Not just content, not just surviving, actually genuinely happy. The debt she'd come to repay had transformed into something neither of them had expected. A partnership built on mutual respect, hard work, and the kind of trust that only came from surviving hell together and coming out stronger. Spring arrived with a rush of green and new life. The cattle gave birth to healthy calves. The fields came alive with grass. The ranch woke up from winter's dormancy and exploded with possibility. Cole and Mara stood on the porch one morning, watching the sun rise over land that was theirs. Truly theirs now, not the bank's, not Briggs', not anyone else's. We did it, Cole said quietly. Yeah, we did. What do you think comes next? Mara considered the question, thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd built, everything that still lay ahead. More the same, I guess. More work, more challenges, more fighting to keep what we've built. Sounds exhausting. Probably will be. Cole smiled. Good thing we're stubborn. Good thing. They stood there in comfortable silence, and Mara understood something she'd been learning slowly over the past year. She'd come to Iron Ridge to repay a debt, to settle an obligation and move on. But somewhere along the way, the debt had stopped mattering, had transformed into something else entirely. She'd found a home, a purpose, a place where she didn't have to prove her worth because it was self-evident in everything she did, where she could finally stop running and start living. The frontier was still brutal, still unforgiving, still a place where one bad season could destroy everything you'd built. But Mara wasn't afraid anymore, because she'd learned the most important lesson the frontier had to teach. Survival wasn't about enduring alone, wasn't about being the toughest or the strongest or the most self-sufficient. It was about finding people worth fighting for, about building something together that none of you could build alone, about having the courage to claim your place and defend it with everything you had. Iron Ridge wasn't perfect, probably never would be. There would be more struggles, more challenges, more moments where everything hung in the balance. But that was life on the frontier. And Mara Keaton, once an overlooked drifter with nothing but grit, had found her place in it, had proven that survival wasn't just about enduring the wild. It was about having the courage to claim your place in it and never, ever letting go.